Esther change her name from Sinovich to Simpson. She hadn't protested, but she also hadn't seen the need to go to such lengths to conceal her ethnicity. With her fine features, pale blue eyes and small oval face, framed by a wavy brown bob, she didn't look distinctly Jewish. In fact, she didn't believe she had any features of distinction, and under the circumstances she considered that to be an advantage. Since 1934, when Austrian Nazis had attempted a coup and assassinated the Chancellor, Engelbert Dollfuss, they had been strengthening their position in the country. Austria remained under the control of the Fatherland Front, a fascist political party that was not openly anti-Semitic, but many citizens believed it was only a matter of time before the Nazis tried to unify Austria with Germany. Everyone Esther had talked to in Britain agreed that this was the case, leaving little doubt about the long-term danger to the country's Jewish population. Esther sat back on the narrow cot and leaned against the wall, her upper body vibrating with the shudders of the carriage. Her mother-of-pearl watch face was luminescent in the semi-darkness, showing that the time was 5 o'clock. Her journey would take another 2 hours. She had travelled by night through Paris, Strasbourg and Munich, sleeping in her heavy woolen suit and thick cotton undergarments, yet her eyes still twitched with fatigue. She took a sip from her tea flask and pulled the blanket up under her chin, but then she quickly let it drop. She needed to make sure she didn't doze off and find herself in a hurry to disembark, or worse still, oversleep and end up in Istanbul. Staring into the vast blackness beyond the window, she considered what her family might say if they received a telegram explaining that she'd accidentally journeyed to Turkey. Her father would have the satisfaction of telling her he had been right to argue that his only daughter should not be travelling the continent alone aboard the Orient Express. She frowned, disturbed at the idea of failing before she had even begun. Leaning forward, she pressed her forehead to the glass, the cold stinging her skin. She smiled involuntarily as her eyes caught on faint silhouettes outside. Were they mountains or churches, alpine firs or spires? Was the train passing through the countryside or skirting around Austrian villages? She thought about the cherished 5 years she had spent in Vienna, and the 2 summers since then, when she had returned to visit friends, enjoy musical performances, and play her violin. Soon she would once again be at the Südbahnhof, the city's largest railway station, and this time someone from the International Fellowship of Reconciliation would be there to meet her. From 1928 to 1933, she had worked in the Austrian capital as an interpreter for Roger Soltau, the secretary of the fellowship, and an old friend from the University of Leeds, who had insisted she take the job. Her parents' concerns and the political volatility in Germany had made her pause to think, but she hadn't been able to resist seizing the opportunity. She had a great deal of respect and admiration for the fellowship. After the Great War, a number of pacifists had formed an international operation that aimed to prevent war from breaking out again. With growing sadness, Esther now had to acknowledge that the fellowship was unlikely to achieve its goal. However, its Austrian branch was ideally placed to assist the Society for the Protection of Science and Learning in contacting and helping local scholars who were most in need. She was looking forward to working with Roger again. On the 30th of January 1933, Adolf Hitler had become Chancellor of Germany. A few months later, the Nazi Party had barred Jewish Germans from government employment, leaving over 1,000 university teachers and researchers out of work. In May 1933, the progressive British economist William Beveridge and the Jewish-Hungarian physicist Leo Szilard, with the support of several other leading academics based in England, had launched the Society in an effort to protect scholars from fascism in Europe. Leo happened to be a recent acquaintance of Esther's, and she had clearly impressed him with her work ethic, because he soon recruited her as assistant secretary of the Society. Ever since, she'd been helping to arrange grants and safe passage for refugee scholars, along with their accommodation, employment and bank accounts. They were each given 2 years to establish themselves in Britain, and not one of them had been sent back. But the number of applications had swelled, from 30 each week to over 100, as the Nazi Party had grown in power and enacted further bigoted laws. With a glance at the gold band on her finger, Esther slid her hand into the fox stole that her mother had insisted she travel with, clutching it tighter than necessary as jolts of excitement, then fear, passed through her. She was so close to catch.